So at the end of game week 10, I managed to just break into the top 100k at 97k overall. I went through my rough transfer plans yesterday, and we're going to expand a little bit more on that today in my game week 11 team selection. Given it's literally been a day since I made my transfer plans video, I'm not going to spend too long going over my team as it finished in game week 10 because, well, I went through it yesterday. I don't want to waste your time going through stuff you have already seen. Flecken in goal, Guardiola, Aït-Nouri, Lewis, Rodgers, Palmer and Bumo, Salah, who I had as my captain. Another goal for Chris Wood, Raul Jimenez and Haaland. I got 57 points, 97k overall, and I have 3 free transfers with 0.3 million in the bank going into game week 11. So players that were kind of on the chopping block based on this were Flecken, maybe Rico Lewis, Rodgers if he, is injured. It looks like he's back in training. Same with Cole Palmer, who has a knock, and potentially Raul Jimenez as well. And we'll go through the positions with my team and talk through those now. All right, so looking at the goalkeeper and defenders then, I wanted to address a couple of players straight away who are just nailed on and going to start in my team for game week 11, that being Aït-Nouri and Guardiola. Both of them are ridiculous from an attacking perspective this season, and I've got to say I don't really see an alternative that's better at their price point. Aït-Nouri, yes, Wolves have been really poor defensively, but there aren't really many 4.5 million-ish defenders that you can really bank on to keep clean sheets anyway. Yes, Nottingham Forest defenders, you can see Ain is on my bench there, but the next couple of fixtures against Newcastle and Arsenal, I'd be hard-pressed to expect a clean sheet in those games, despite, of course, how good Forest have been. And Aït-Nouri is just supreme from an attacking perspective. Southampton at home is his fixture. Probably one of the best fixtures you can ask for, right? Guardiola, Brighton away, you know, I wouldn't really expect a Man City clean sheet in that one, and to be honest. And then Tottenham and Liverpool after that, you know, they look a bit of a shell of their former selves at the moment to Man City. But Guardiola was continually delivering and popping up with goals. So I don't really have an issue keeping him for game week 11. And also starting him. So I'll rule those two players out from transfers straight away. Flecken and Lewis are the two that I'm potentially considering getting rid of. Flecken, I always say this with FPL, but the best goalkeepers in the game are ones that keep like an average amount of clean sheets, but they consistently hit the saves bonus points. Flecken's only really doing one of those at the moment in hitting saves bonus. But I look at the other goalkeepers in the game that I can afford at his price point. Just going back to my team, I've got 0.3 million in the bank. I just don't see an alternative that's worth making a transfer, particularly before the international break. I'm always a little bit conscious of making transfers ahead of an international break, just because it just carries a little bit of a risk with it. Because, you know, if you're bringing in an international player and they get injured, you're in trouble. You've wasted a transfer, basically. So I just don't want to do that. I think I'll stick with Flecken this week. The one player that I'm really considering getting rid of is Rico Lewis. I've made quite a good bit of profit on him since I bought him. He's obviously going to be a perpetual minutes risk in that Man City side, right? And also, Man City have not really been keeping clean sheets this season. And the fixtures do turn. So he could potentially be on the chopping block. Before I get onto my analysis of Rico Lewis and potential replacements, etc., I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying my videos, find my content useful, I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the international break. You can see down below, I'm probably really close at the point that this video comes out. Now, if you enjoy my content, it's totally free. All you got to do is click subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you could help me out and do that, right? I'll start talking about Lewis replacements. So first up, I just wanted to look at defensive rankings in the league. So obviously when you're picking defenders, you want to pick defenders who are likely to keep clean sheets, right? And what we've got here is expected goals against and actual goals against. So, you know, the underlying data for goals conceded for each team and then the actual goals conceded. A couple of teams that surprised me in terms of their stats so far, one of them being Fulham. They are the second best team in the league so far for expected goals conceded. And where do they rank? They've conceded 13. So they've actually underperformed their expected goals conceded stats because they've conceded more than they've been expected to. Forest are up there as well. They're the second best defence for actual goals conceded and third best for expected. Tottenham are up there as well. You know, you'd always consider Tottenham to be a relatively poor defence, but they've actually kept the fourth most clean sheets in the league so far. Fourth most clean sheets, that's not correct. Conceded the fourth fewest goals in the league, obviously joint with two other teams. Same as Man City and Arsenal, by the way, and ranked fourth for expected goals against as well. So, you know, all of that chat about Tottenham being poor defensively that even I've spouted, not necessarily true when you look at the numbers. However, with Mickey van der Ven injured and potentially Romero too, I do think that changes them defensively. So yeah, looking at the defensive rankings and where I might find a cheap defender replacement for Rico Lewis from, certainly looking like Fulham and Nottingham Forest could be my source. Next up, I've got a model from 11ify. This is projected clean sheets for the next 6 game weeks, and I've ranked it by, you know, the total for each, the top teams for clean sheet odds, basically. Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, the top 3. I think that's basically a given. You know, they will always perpetually be one of the top teams because they're the best teams defensively. Regardless of their fixtures, you'll always kind of see them in and around the top. But it's the next 3-4 teams that I'm interested in, right? Newcastle are 4th, Man United are 5th, and Bournemouth are 6th, and Chelsea in 7th as well. And these 4 teams all have decent defender options around the price point of Rico Lewis. So I'm thinking Newcastle have Lewis Hall, who looks to have nailed down that left-back spot. It's 4.3 million. It would save me a bit of cash on Rico Lewis. He's, I think, relatively decent from an attacking perspective as well, and it does look like he's nailed to start and play every game. So he's one option. Another one at Man United is Mazwari. He's up to, I believe, 4.6 million now. I guess the one doubt about Man United players is they're about to bring in a new manager who will change their formation to a 3/5 at the back. And you'd have to ask the question, does Mazwari fit into that formation? I think the jury's probably out on exactly how he fits into that. So I'd probably wait and see on Mazwari. You know, if everything was the same, I'll say under Ten Hag, probably not under Ten Hag, but you know what I mean? If the system was kind of the same and you were expecting them to play a back 4, I suggest he's a good option. But with a back 5, I just don't know. And there are a couple of tough fixtures mixed in there. Matchday 14 and 16, a 10 and 8% chance of keeping a clean sheet is pretty woeful, to be honest. So I'll probably stay clear of Mazwari. So potentially looking at Newcastle, Lewis Hall, Livramento, a couple of players like that. Bournemouth, I'm looking at maybe Zabarnyi as an option at 4.5 million. He could be good. And Chelsea as well, looking at maybe Colwill. So there's a few options based on the 11ify model that I can look at, basically. So in addition to that, what I've got here is a view of the expected points data from a couple of sources that I use and trust. We've got Fantasy Football Hub and FPL Review. So you can look for yourself. I'm not going to go through them all. 8 Nori's top for Fantasy Football Hub. Players that I've already mentioned, Mazwari appears there for Fantasy Football Hub. For FPL Review, Colwill, who I mentioned for Chelsea, Lewis Hall, Livramento are up there as well. And Destiny Udogie of Tottenham. Remember, if we just go back to the defensive ratings, although I guess I'm just thinking kind of aloud as I say this, Tottenham are ranking good, but without Van der Ven and Romero, it probably does ruin them a little bit. So based on what I'm seeing here, I think Lewis Hall or Livramento are kind of emerging as reasonable replacements there for Rico Lewis. I think, though, they're great, don't get me wrong, but the thought again of just making transfers ahead of an international break is just quite risky. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, to be fair, that Lewis Hall and Livramento are going to get good minutes for England and, you know, risk injury, etc. But I just like to wait. I don't like to make early transfers before make too many transfers before an international break, particularly when they're a little bit luxury. Like if the worst case scenario happens that Rico Lewis doesn't play, I've just got Aina coming off my bench, who I think is a perfectly acceptable and reliable replacement. And I'm not suggesting that the risk is bringing in someone like Lewis Hall or Livramento and them getting injured. It's using a transfer to bring him in, and then another player in my team gets injured where I need to use transfers to deal with it. So yes, I've got my eye on some potential replacements for Lewis, but just going into game week 11, I don't think it's desperate enough yet, before international break at least, that I need to transfer them. So I think I'm going to stick with Lewis this week, but he's definitely close to being chopped. All right, so onto the midfield then, and there are a couple of players that are currently flagged. Cole Palmer and Morgan Rogers. Salah and Mbeumo are given. I mean, they're going to be in my team. I'm not going to do anything with them. To be honest, I don't think I need to say too much about them. 2 of the best midfielders in the game. I don't need to say too much. Cole Palmer, I believe he basically picked up a knock from the pretty awful challenge that Lisandro Martinez put in on him of Man United. If you remember the clip, most people probably have seen the clip. Palmer tried to flick the ball over his head as a piece of skill, got round Martinez, and Martinez basically kicked him in the upper part of his knee and brought him down. So Palmer was seen hobbling after that game with a bit of a knock as a result. I think he'll be fine for Arsenal. It's Arsenal. I think he will do whatever he can to be fit, and he will basically be forced to play in that 11 in my mind. So I'm not too worried about that. And I think he's not necessarily put up the best numbers against the big teams in the league so far this season, but I back him to do well against Arsenal regardless, you know, so I'm happy to keep him. Morgan Rogers, on the other hand, he's in training, so the injury that was reported at the weekend, he got subbed off for an injury. He got subbed off for what looked like an ankle injury, I think it was, but he's been pictured in training this week. So I don't think it's serious, but there is one potential replacement for Rogers that I do like the look of, and I think Semenyo could be that replacement. Now, the fixtures for Villa I'm not saying they take a drastic turn, but I would say the fixtures for Bournemouth, I've only got the next 3 here, but the fixtures for Bournemouth are quite a lot better. And also, I don't know about you, but I am getting a little bit worried about Rogers' early substitutions. It's a couple of game weeks now where he's been subbed off early. Oh, wrong screen. So I don't think it's enough for me to get rid of him yet, but I'm not saying he's on the chopping block and a bad option by any stretch of the imagination, but just with how Semenyo has been performing, the numbers, I guess, aren't too different when you look at them, to be fair, but the XG Semenyo's put up is a lot better, and the XA, so he is proving to be, from an underlying perspective at least, a little bit more dangerous than Rogers, and the fixtures are better coming up. So I don't think I'll be getting rid of Rogers. I definitely don't think I'll be doing that, and I'll be sticking with him, but I've just got in the back of my mind that Semenyo could be a really good option. I go back to, though, the principles that I said with my defence. I don't like making early transfers before an international break because you just don't know what kind of disasters can come up during an international break, right? And also, I'm sort of against the concept of luxury transfers. And by luxury transfers, I mean taking out one player who is decent, you know him to be a decent option, and you know he's going to play, for another one who is a decent option, who you know is going to play, but you just think they're going to score a few more points. I always find that those transfers never really work out for me. Case in point this season, I sold Solanke a couple of weeks ago. He didn't perform in the game week after I sold him. I thought the transfer was a great move. I sold him for Raul Jimenez, by the way. And he's got 2 goals and an assist, right, against Aston Villa in a week. So it kind of proves, I sold him because I'd given up on him. And then a couple of weeks later, he absolutely hauls and makes my transfer look a bit silly. So that's case in point of that kind of luxury transfer philosophy not paying off. And I'm really bearing that in mind with Morgan Rogers. So right now, I think I'll probably just stick to this midfield. All right, the forwards then, and I think there's a bit of chat to be had about these 3 players. So I've got Haaland, Raul Jimenez, Chris Wood at the moment, right? The first thing I wanted to talk about, people are just probably bored out of the skull of me talking about Haaland at the moment, right? And I'll get on to who I think is the best captain in Game Week 11 in a second, because I've done a bit of analysis on that. It's a big decision to make, basically. But my decision as to whether I get rid of Erling Haaland is all around captaincy. My philosophy, and I think the reason that I've gotten into the top 100k at this stage of the season, is obviously luck, but I also have just had the best captain every week. Every week I've either captained Salah or Haaland, and the weeks where I haven't captained Haaland, I've gone for Salah and he's outperformed Haaland, and that's really how I've gotten to this rank. I probably solely put it down to this, really, is captaincy points. So for me, captaincy is mega. It's huge in FPL. And with Haaland, the money you're spending on him, over 15 million, if you're not going to captain him, then you should get rid of him, in my mind. I think there are, looking at these next 5 fixtures, Game weeks 12 and 13, there are cases in my mind to captain someone else. But all around that, I do think Haaland is a genuine captaincy shout. And it's not that he's not been getting the chances. I probably incorrectly said that on my transfer plans video, actually. I was waiting for Kevin De Bruyne to come back to make Haaland a better option. But Haaland's been getting the chances. He's just not been finishing them so far. I just think, you know, the great finishing that he had at the start of the season, where he was massively overperforming his underlying numbers, the variance has come in now and it's the opposite. So he's putting up good underlying numbers, but not necessarily finishing his chances. So the whole trend of ups and downs is kind of happening with him. I mean, I cannot not keep the faith in Haaland in my mind. So I think he's going to stay in my team. But hopefully that sort of summary of arguments to get rid of or keep him based on captaincy makes sense. The next player is Chris Wood. Now, don't get me wrong, right? The guy has been an absolute hero in my team, okay? I can't even believe this myself, but I'm of the mind that at some point down the line, he could be a sell. And the reason I'm saying this is fixtures. So his natural replacement, I just showed it there, his natural replacement is Cunha, right? Cunha is probably Wolves' talisman. And I think based on Sarabia's performance in Game Week 10, it was absolutely terrible, by the way, who I believe is Wolves' first choice penalty taker if he's on the pitch. I think Cunha is now the Wolves penalty taker because I don't think Sarabia is going to play again. Now, Cunha's numbers versus Wood is he's quite a way down. Scored half the goals, but actually taken more shots, got about half the XG, but basically more than double the expected assists. So comparatively, their numbers are similar, right, in terms of expected returns. Well, that's sort of, you know what I mean. They're comparatively, in terms of expected returns per 90, they're about the same. But the one differentiator between the two of them is fixtures coming up. So Chris Wood, his next, how many have we got there? Is that 10 fixtures? Newcastle, Arsenal, Ipswich is a good one, Man City, Man United, Villa, Spurs. They're all mixed in there in the next few fixtures, where Wolves have got a pretty tidy run for the next sort of 10 fixtures or so. So comparatively on the fixtures, Cunha edges it. And I'm not saying that I'm going to sell. I don't think I'm going to do it in Game Week 11, to be honest, because Newcastle at home is hardly, a bad fixture, right, for Forest. I think Chris Wood could score in that game. And to be completely honest with you, with how good his finishing has been and how disappointing, I would say, the Arsenal and Man City defences have been, those are the two big teams that he's got coming up. You wouldn't rule him out scoring in those games. But I am just of the mind that there is another option in that position with much better fixtures that could be worth pivoting to. And I'm almost of the mind to, is it smart to take my Chris Wood points and run, if that makes sense? I've had him since Game Week 6. He's been an absolute incredible servant for my team. But looking at the fixtures coming up, I wouldn't be surprised if his points and goals did kind of drop off. You might think I'm talking absolute nonsense about Chris Wood here, but it is just something I'm bearing in mind. But, all that in mind, he's got Newcastle in Game Week 11, international break coming up again, thinking about avoiding transfers, etc. Chris Wood, at least, I think he's going to stay in my team this week, but I am conscious of Cunha being an option. One player who has disappointed me a bit since he's been in my team, I brought him at the end of Game Week 8 as part of my big 4 transfer move, is Raul Jimenez. Now, I did this in my transfers plans video as well. I did a little bit of analysis. Well, what I've got here is just an analysis of his numbers basically from the FPL website. It's nothing too advanced. I've just done a screen capture, as you can see. But the reason I brought him in is because ahead of Game Week 8, since his time starting for Fulham, not only has he been good in terms of goals, he's been good in terms of underlying data. So look at his expected goal involvements from Game Week 5, right? 0.5, 0.94 against Forest, who are very resolute defensively. 1.24 against Man City, 0.74 against Villa. I think I was unlucky not to get a return out of him against Everton. He put up 0.71 XG. But against Brentford, who are one of the worst defences in the league, I think this is the defenders total, yeah. One of the worst defences in the league, 20 goals conceded. I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't put up any numbers. It's probably a case of being a little bit impatient with him. And I don't think Jimenez is a player I'm going to sell. Ultimately, you're probably going to get to me rolling this week. But I'm explaining sort of the thought process of the players I could be selling and potential replacements for them. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned that run of, 5 fixtures of good underlying data and returns for Jimenez is a little bit of a purple patch. I think back to the other Fulham striker, Muniz, who last season put up great numbers for a run of 10 to 15 games. And then he started back this season. It was just absolutely terrible. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that run of returns for Jimenez is a purple patch. But one game where he's amassed 0.09 XG, and considering his price as well, right? He's what? Yeah, 5.8 million. You can't really expect the world from a player that's 5.8 million. So I'm probably going to stay patient and stick with this front 3, at least for Game Week 11. After the international break, I'll obviously have one extra transfer and probably a little bit more time to assess things. So the last thing that we didn't speak about there was captaincy. I think the captaincy this week is huge. And I think there are 3 genuine options you could select as captain. And they all kind of have their upsides and downsides. For me, it's Salah, who has Villa at home, Haaland, who has Brighton away, and Son, who has Ipswich. Now, they rank as the 3 top players for expected points from both Fantasy Football Hub and FPL Review. So I'm hopefully going to talk through my thought process on who I'm going to captain here. And it makes sense to me, at least. I have my feeling on who I think is the best captain. You might well disagree, but hopefully you're watching this video because you value my opinion on things. So first up, we've got here the expected points. And in both algorithms, Salah comes out on top. He's 0.5 more expected points in Fantasy Football Hub and 0.7 more in FPL review. I think, for me, I don't have Son, right? I think Son is a respectable captaincy option, but I have no way really of getting him in my team, and I just don't have him, right? So there's no point me going for him. So my captaincy decision is between Salah and Haaland. So what we've got here is an analysis of their last 5 fixtures and the numbers that they've put up, right? And in summary, I don't think there is a whole lot in it, quite simply. Haaland has only scored 1 goal in 5 games, but the underlying numbers he's put up are not horrendous. Whereas in Salah's the same, he's just actually finished his chances. And like I said, you might completely disagree with that, and that's totally fine. Let me know in the comments. But my thought of Haaland's returns is just recently he's been underperforming the data because it's just variance. You know, he's gone through the process of overperforming it at one point, and now he's just going through a little dip and underperforming it. And I don't think there's any point in time where you can say that's going to finish. It could well finish against Brighton, you know, and just analysing the fixtures as well, that's probably the next thing to look at. The team's defensive rating. So, again, reminder, Salah has Villa, Haaland has Brighton. So, expected goals conceded, Villa sit on 13.72 and Brighton sit on 15.81. In terms of actuals goals conceded, Brighton are on 14, Villa are on 15. Now, for me, there's not enough in it, basically, to say there's a clear better defence out of Villa and Brighton this season. I really don't think there's enough in it. Which makes the captaincy call, for me, almost like an emotional one, or at least my view of how the respective fixtures will play out. And I just think Brighton, without Lewis Dunk, the way they play such a high line, Kevin De Bruyne likely to be back for Man City, I would say, in some way, shape or form for that game. I know Man City have knocked off form recently, but I just think game on. They got Pep Guardiola as a manager. If there was ever a manager to get them out of a bit of a rut, it's Pep, right? Basically, my gut is telling me to captain Haaland. And also, I think the simple fact that I still have Salah in my team as well kind of protects me from, you know, if he does haul, it's not the end of the world. I still have him in my team. And I think quite a lot of people will be selling Haaland at this point. Probably people around my rank. You know, I wouldn't imagine too many non-engaged managers to be in the top 100k at the moment. And I quite like the thought of getting an edge on them by captaining Haaland. I don't think he will be the popular captain pick. And I also have a gut feel he can do well against Brighton. So yeah, with all those things in mind, it might be unpopular, but my gut is telling me to captain Haaland this week. And ultimately, based on everything I said, you know, there are plenty of players in this team I could potentially get rid of, but I just don't want to do anything rash. And I don't think before the international break, it's really worth selling any of these players. If there was one player I could really look to sell, it's probably Rico Lewis. You know, Man City's poor defence this season, the fact he's not necessarily nailed for minutes, the fact that Man City have taken a downturn in form and there are other good options around his price, he's probably the one I could take out. And obviously I spoke about him earlier. But yeah, right now, my gut is telling me to captain Haaland, not make a transfer and roll. So 3 free transfers will become 4 after the international break. So another kind of mini wildcard available to me if I want to. 66 expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub with a 96% AI rating. And I got to say, it's boring, I know. I'm not going to use a transfer. And this is probably going to be my team for Game Week 11. All right, that's the end of the video. I feel like I rambled on and on there. So let me know in the comments if it made sense to you or not. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. Like I said, we're really heading close now to 10,000 subscribers. It would be absolutely amazing if I could hit that before the international break. And just a thank you basically to everyone who has supported and subscribed to the channel so far. And if you haven't and enjoyed the video, please do. You can subscribe. It should be just there on your screen. I think that's everything for this video. Like I said, sorry if it's a little bit rambly, but thank you very much for watching nonetheless. And I'll catch you in my next video.